Well, welcome to the Burn Up Podcast. I'm excited about our show today. I've got my friend Curtis Morley with me today. Curtis is the word you use is an emotionologist. He's a best-selling author. Just started a brand new podcast called Counterfeit Emotions. This man is in tune with authenticity. We're going to get into all sorts of different things today. And he's very good at articulating things as we talk about pain and emotions and really how much control we have. And because many times we don't feel like we're in control. So Curtis, thank you for joining me today on the Burn Up Podcast.
I'm so excited to be here, Adam.
So one of the things I want to jump into is authenticity. So one of my big things today is I want to be my authentic self in every scenario. You know, everybody in one form or another can tend to, or many times wear a mask, you know? So my default in the past is I'm a recovering people pleaser. And,
Same.
You know,
Same.
And in many ways, I was a chameleon because I would show up one way with this person and that person, and it became exhausting, almost like you forget who you are, you know. And for me, the reason I was showing up in that way is because I wanted to be loved, I wanted to be accepted, almost, you know, really unconsciously trying to control the narrative of how they saw me, which the irony in that is I can't control what anyone thinks about me, you know.
Yeah.
And then having gone through some pretty traumatic and strenuous things, you know, you finally, when you get ripped down to your core, it's like, okay, who am I? Who do I want to be? And, you know, as I've become more confident and secure in who I am as a man today, I would say more than I ever have been, there's not a need to wear a mask. But I feel that it's very challenging for most people to be authentic. So this is your world. So let's jump into that.
Yeah, I love that you wanted to start here because authenticity is so important, and it's actually getting hijacked right now. The word authenticity is getting hijacked because everybody's like, well, live your truth instead of live truth. Live your, you know, whatever it is, and understanding what authenticity really is.
So I have a question right there, because truth can sometimes be subjective. I mean, there's facts that you can do, but, you know, for example, you and I were here on this podcast. We could go talk to someone we know, share our experience, and it would probably be similar, but we could potentially share two completely different experiences based off our own interpretation, our own experience with it. And someone might think, well, wait a minute, were they on the same podcast or not?
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
I'd love to go deeper on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the word that authentic or authenticity or my truth is replacing the true version is my experience or my opinion or my life. It's not necessarily my truth, because truth is truth. But yet, just like you said, we'll walk away from this podcast. We're both in the same room. We're both talking on the same mics, and we'll have a completely different opinion because our lives have been so varied. And so that opinion is important. And it actually ties into what you said at the beginning is the people pleaser and how the authenticity of the people pleaser is really limited because I'm this person A with this guy, I'm person B with this girl, I'm person C with my kids, I'm, you know, wherever I'm at. And there is no tapping into the true self. And so, yeah, I'd love to dive into that aspect of
Dude, let's go there.
The platform.
This is a big thing that I talk about. This is something that I'm really consciously embodying in myself. So yeah, let's go deeper.
Yeah. So this is actually the foundation of the Counterfeit Emotions platform is authenticity. And just to put a framework around it is that the premise behind Counterfeit Emotions is that every authentic emotion or every emotion that serves us and takes us where we want to go has a counterfeit, except for one. There's only one emotion without a counterfeit. Every other emotion has that mask, that masquerade that's trying to portray itself as the original or the authentic emotion. And what you'd said, the people pleaser, this is one of the pairs, or I call them dyads. This is one of the dyads that kind of breaks people's brains because there's some that are easy to understand, like guilt and shame. Guilt is actually a beautiful, healthy, really important emotion. Shame is its counterfeit. Shame says, I am wrong. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Guilt says, I made a mistake and I can repair and I can fix that. And that's the motivation behind guilt, is actually empathy to repair. But shame says, not only, guilt says I made a mistake. Shame says, my existence on earth is a mistake. One talks to the character, the other talks to the action.
Shame is attached to worth.
Exactly. Yes. And guilt is attached to, like, the base emotion behind guilt is empathy. Guilt, and this one kind of flips people's lids. They're like, wait, guilt and empathy are paired? Yes. And if you look at the frequency scale, I don't know if you've ever looked at the frequency scale of emotions. Like, every emotion has a frequency. And the very bottom emotion is shame and apathy. Shame and apathy fill that lowest frequency spot. But guilt, because the base emotion is empathy, it's actually a positive emotion. And people are like, wait a minute, I don't get this. And the reason why is because, let's say I hurt you in some way. Guilt says, go to Adam, connect with him, make amends, repair. And so that's what I do. It says, you're hurting, and guess what? I'm the cause of your hurt. That's me. I did that. So therefore, I need to repair. I know how it feels to hurt, and I caused your hurt. So I'm going to go to you, and I'm going to make amends. Whereas shame says, hide.
So can you tie an emotion? So let's use that same example, right? You hurt me. You're feeling guilty. You know you hurt me, but you choose not to do anything about it or address it or anything. What emotion would you attach to that?
If I'm not going to do anything, if I'm just going to be like,
I feel guilty, but I'm like, maybe it's actually the shame. That's what it is.
That's exactly what it is.
It's the shame, because many times, me acknowledging that let's reverse the roles. I hurt you. Me acknowledging the fact that I hurt you. If I could attach my worth to that. I mean, this is really prevalent in attachment wounds, specifically in relationships, right?
Yes.
And so if, I trespass you, I do something to hurt you, but then I don't do anything. But the truth is, if I don't say anything, it's because I'm somehow connecting what I did with who I am.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That you nail it on the head. And so I've got a list of all the authentic and all the counterfeits that I've identified. And I've done research in focus groups for years, literally years. And out of that, I found over 1,000 different emotions. And I narrowed it down to 42 different pairs, these dyads. And if you look at the authentic side, like you go through these, and most of them are meant to be held, like love. Love is meant to be held inside of you. Joy is meant to be held. But there's a few that aren't. There's a few that their entire purpose is to motivate you to action. And guilt is one of them. Guilt is one of those emotions that it comes into your body and it's not meant to stay. It's meant to move you to go say, hey, Adam, I am so sorry I hurt you. What can I do to repair? And that's the purpose of guilt. And don't get me wrong, guilt hurts. It has pain attached to it. And it's meant to. It's meant to have pain attached to it, because if it didn't, there's only 4 personality types that can't feel guilt. There's sociopath, psychopath, narcissist, and borderline personality disorder. If we didn't have guilt in our world, we'd just be a bunch of narcissists and psychopaths running around doing whatever we want, hurting whoever we want, and never making the world a better place. It would just be all about me, and I'm going to hurt you, and I don't care. But guilt says, okay, I'm going to go to you. I'm going to make amends. And then once that happens, this is the key. Once that happens, the guilt flows through. The guilt is no longer here. It's now flowing through us, and it's done its job. And that's one of the key ways to know if I'm in shame or if I'm in guilt. If I'm in shame, even after I repair, I still feel like I suck. I still feel bad. I still feel like, oh, I'm this horrible person. If I'm tapped into guilt and I make amends and I repair, then it flows through me and I'm done. And the reminder of the pain, it's still up in the brain. That reminder of pain is still there, but the feeling of, oh, I'm this horrible person, all of that is attributed to shame.
And I think I've had a lot of shame in my life, a lot.
Yeah, I
An
understand.
incredible amount and heavy worth tied to it, and I've shared this multiple times. I remember when I, first went to therapy when I was married at the time, and somewhere within the process, she asked me, she goes, "Do you feel worthy of love?" And I couldn't even answer the question. I mean, it should have been, hell yeah, I'm worthy of love, but I couldn't even answer it because there was such a lack of my own self-love and in my own journey of accepting who I am, the good, the bad, the all. It's not who I was, or it's not, I don't today attach my worth or who I am as a man for things that I've done in the past or things that I'm not proud of. It's something I did.
Yeah.
It's not who I am.
Yes.
But it's fascinating just as I've kind of geeked out on all this myself, because really going down in my own studies of trying to understand me and my own experiences and then how everybody else moves through the world. Many times we react to a particular way someone's showing up. And what I have found is the more that I can get to know the root of it or where it's coming from, specifically like in interpersonal relationships.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you understand, for example, if you're in a relationship with somebody that has potentially an insecure attachment to avoidant or dismissive avoidant or whatever, as an example, and their inability to do this or the inability to do whatever that happens to be, I can be frustrated. It's still there. I still want them to show up a certain way. But nevertheless, when I know their attachment, I can then meet with them compassion. I can also not take it personal. I can also then detach my worth
Yes.
from how somebody else is reacting to how I'm showing up. Does that make sense?
That makes so much sense. And you hit on one of the keys of authenticity is the attachment. And if you look at actually most religions around the world, but specifically Buddhism, if you look at Buddhism, that is one of the fundamental principles of Buddhism is unattachment. And what I mean specifically by that is we talked about masks. We put on these masks, the ego mask, I want to show up for you this way, so put it on, right? And the reason we do that is because we're attached, meaning we attach our worth to something. And in my case, I used to attach my worth to so many things. I am CEO of a company. I am, number one fastest growing company in the Silicon Slopes. I am, and I had this whole trophy shelf that tried to show me my worth. That, look at that. And this magazine that I'm in and this, and I would attach my worth to all of those things. And that is the opposite of authenticity, is when we can strip away the titles. And it sounds like with our divorces, we've gone through very similar things. But when we can attach our titles and we can attach or detach from all these things that we say, I am of worth because of CEO of the year or whatever, blah, 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 because of those things, then that says I'm of worth. But I can never put my worth on the trophy shelf. And I can never be the authentic Curtis until all of those are stripped away. And when I find my worth where it actually lives, which is right here, then that's when I can start to be my authentic self.
Yeah. So I am super passionate about the worth, self-worth. We're here in Utah. We live in a religious community, predominantly, Mormons, Latter-day Saints, and a lot of people that are active in the church, not active in the church, the word worthiness, if you will, many times is tied to religion, whatever happens to be. And what's interesting is the men that I work with, and they might not necessarily have, that's the word that they use, but, for example, I've got a client, for example, that makes a ridiculous amount of money, tremendously successful, life's doing great, but there's some strife in his relationship. And he gets to the core of it, he actually doesn't feel worthy of love. Yeah. Or people that have money blockages, and many times they don't feel worthy of wealth. They don't feel worthy of success. They don't feel worthy of whatever it happens to be. And it's fascinating that you can go back and you can tie many of these things or blockages or why people don't get to a certain place or seem to hit, a barrier, if you will. A lot of times it's tied to worth of how they see themselves. And I am adamant, and I'll scream it from the rafters, is we are worthy because we're humans. End of story. Like, our worth is not determined upon anything, kind of what you were saying earlier, awards, accolades, trophies, whatever happens to be. It's just like, no, I'm worthy, period. End of story.
Period. Absolutely.
Like there's not that just like period. There's not an asterisk. There's not read the fine print.
There's not an if. I'm worthy if I do this. I'm worthy if I'm the cool entrepreneur guy. I'm worthy if I've got the nuclear family. There is none.
And I feel the majority of people. I mean, I work with men, but I believe this is with women. I mean, if you really peel back, they don't feel worthy of it.
Yeah.
And then the shame and different cycles attached to it. So, I mean, you've been in this space a lot longer than I have, and as you're working with people, how do you? I mean, I've got my own experiences, my own beliefs, but from your perspective, how does someone really that questions their worth? What's the catalyst? How can someone all get to a place where you and I see it today? Where they actually are worthy. Period. Easier said than done.
It is, and for me, that process was pain, and my divorce was the hardest thing I've ever done, no question about it. And at the same time, it's been the greatest blessing of my life. And I don't say that because of, I'm glad I'm done with the past. I say that because the blessing is that I needed to be a different person. I did. I needed to be a different version of Curtis. And it was the pain that stripped everything from me. It was the pain that stripped all of that. And you can say I was having a Job moment where everything was stripped away. And at that point, I realized there were only a couple things that were sovereignly mine. There were only a couple things that couldn't be taken because everything else had been. And when I got to that point, I realized the only things that are mine, they're not the trophy shelf. They're not the car, the house, the money, nothing. None of that is mine. All of that can be taken. Every piece, except for my ability to choose. Like Viktor Frankl talks about it, the last of human freedoms is the ability to choose one's actions no matter the circumstance. So my ability to choose, number one. Number two is my soul. And that does have infinite divine worth. And number three is my relationship with God and Christ. Everything else in the world can be taken. Everything. And at the time, my mom was going through breast cancer, and I wasn't sure if she was going to be around. Like, it was one of those true Job moments.
When it rains, it pours. Yeah.
And I'm so grateful. And the funny thing is, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. And at the same time, I'm so grateful that I had that experience, because that taught me that because everything can be taken, everything is a gift.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir here. So my company's burn up, here the logo here behind us. The truth is, when we, again, take divorce, I mean, no one gets married thinking, oh, I'm going to get divorced one day. And I wouldn't wish divorce on my worst enemy. It was hell. And I look back on that, and I am so grateful for it for so many reasons. And even where we are today's family unit, the list goes on and on. And so for our family, it's been extremely positive. And I know that's not the case with a lot of people, but nevertheless, it was hell. And yet it was a activator, the pain, if you will, the burning down, if you will. Really, yes, my marriage burned to the ground, if you will, but Adam, burn up, actually elevated, rose through the flames like a phoenix rising, and my tagline's freedom's in the fire. I mean, everything we want's on the other side of what we're avoiding, right?
The other side of the comfort zone.
And so pain is a gift. I think the two greatest gifts, frankly, that God has given us, honestly, the most powerful are emotions or feelings or things that happen in life are pain and fear. And yet our default programming is to avoid both, And so I agree with you that, like, I think it does take pain. I think it does. And that's different levels for different peoples. And we also then have free will what to do with it. That's the, like, well, you get to decide.
Yeah.
So I can choose. I mean, you and I, just like what you said about divorce, so grateful for it. I have gratitude for it, for you personally, where you are today. But how many people do you know that have been divorced for 20 plus years, 30 plus years and still are stuck in that same energy, still haven't moved on, still can't. I mean, it's fascinating. So why can one person choose to do it and another one? And again, you actually came back to it. It's a choice. I just said it. We get to choose what we do with it. And I believe everything's a gift. The good, the bad, everything is. It's what we do with it. And me personally, I don't believe in coincidences. I think everything happens for a reason. And we are presented with opportunities. And if something feels hard or something's painful, which we'll get into this later, many times in the avoidance of that pain leads to addiction. Mm-hmm. When the answer was just face it, or just lean through it. And trust me, when in losing my investment firm, it was 3 years of absolute hell. The pain, the suffering, the shame, the guilt, the emotions were just nearly took my life. It was horrific. A hell that I wish nobody ever would go to. And during that time, I was numbing out, checking out on anything I could do to not feel. And what I was doing was just kicking the can down the road. So in reality, in the effort to not feel,
yeah,
I actually was prolonging my pain.
Yep.
So, but again, the stories and all things, I could talk about this stuff for hours, but I'm very passionate about this. And it's one of the reasons I love your message around this and just what you just saying is pain. Pain's the gift. Pain is the activator, but it's the avoidance of it that creates the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And pain was the very first dyad. So the counterfeit of pain is misery. And my entire life, I thought that there's a wall, and on one side of the wall is pain, and on the other side of the wall is joy and love. And they don't mix. It's, this is a big still wall, goes up all the way into the clouds. You don't get to mix these at all. And I realized as I was going through my deepest pain that there was joy in my relationship with my father, my eternal father. There's joy that at the exact same time that I was feeling this.
Did you recognize that in the moment or after the fact?
It was a crushing moment where I literally wished that the mountain would fall on top of me. And that's when I felt his presence. That's when I felt that. And it was so powerful. It was so, sorry.
No, please.
It was so powerful because the pain was nothing like I've ever felt before. And to feel his arms wrap around me in a way that it broke my brain. I'm like, wait, no, there's a wall. I can't feel joy and pain at the same time, but I am feeling joy. I am feeling love, like an incredible amount of love at the same time that I was feeling the pain. And that's when I said, wait a minute, am I calling this side of the wall the wrong thing? Maybe this isn't pain. Maybe on this side of the wall is something else. And when I started to do the research, I realized my entire life, I was calling it the wrong thing. This side of the wall is misery. I get to choose where to put my pain. I can bury it deep underneath the sludge, that black tar of misery, or I can put it on the other side of the wall and elevate and honor the pain. And when I do that, it changes from pain into a sacred sorrow. But my whole life, I was calling it the wrong thing. I was calling it pain when it was really misery. And misery, by definition, is the absence of joy. And misery is based in two base emotion. They're blame and shame. If you want to be miserable, super easy. You want to dive into the misery, all you have to do is start blaming and shaming. You can blame or shame yourself. You can blame or shame others. Super easy. You dive deep into misery. And I talked about how in the authentic list of emotions, there's only a few that are not supposed to be held. They're not meant to be held. And pain is one of them. Pain is meant to be felt. It's meant to motivate us into action. And what happens when we bury it in the sludge of misery is that pain stays inside. It just cycles. And that pain is trapped, so it cannot escape. And the natural state of pain is not meant to be inside us. The natural state of pain is to move us to action and get us to do something. And then the pain releases.
See, the most powerful thing you said in that entire thing for me is it's a choice.
It is.
Much of what I do with the men that I work with is helping them rewrite the stories. So everything's rooted in a story.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yep.
Right? I found for me as I've embodied this in my own life and the guys I work with, and when I'm feeling certain emotions around something, I've gotten pretty good at this about checking what's the story I'm telling myself, and I can tell a different story. I'm the author of my life, so I can rewrite it, I can change it, and so it's a choice. And the other thing too is so much of this, like we'll use divorce, right? Something common is divorce. Again, nobody wants to get divorced, but if it's happening, whether you're the one that initiated or someone, your partner initiated on you, it's not what you wanted. It's not the outcome, the desired outcome.
Yeah.
And so what happens is we get so fixated on a particular outcome happening. And when it's not happening and we're not ready to accept it, it's, the analogy I give, it's like it's a door. The door is closed. And we're sitting there with a sledgehammer trying to break the door open, trying to push the door open. And it's that resistance to what is what creates suffering, creates the misery, because we're so attached to a particular outcome. And, my definition of surrender is I might not like something, but once I accept it, it moves.
Yes.
It moves from that. And so many times when a door closes, I get attached to outcomes like anybody else. I have desires. And if it doesn't happen in time or it looks different or something happens, of course there's disappointment. Of course it's like, but I've gotten so much better about, okay, let me feel it. Let me feel the pain, but let me hold on to it. And the more that I'm able to detach from that particular outcome, all of a sudden the smoke clears, if you will, and I can see 10 other doors that were opened, that frankly, the minute that one closed were already open. I just didn't see them.
Yeah.
And so, I've had this whole thing around, trying to master how the universe and how God works and all this stuff, right? Just that's in my ego. I'm like, I'm going to figure this out. And of course I'm never going to totally, or even come close to it. But what I've found though is, but the answer to me is like, no, actually you don't need to know. It just is. So when you can just accept what is, it's the most freeing thing. This is literally something new that I'm practicing and embodying literally in the last 30 days. And it is wild, the effects it has in my life. I'm just like, I'm going to go for something. I'm going to do it. I'm planning on it. Like all the things to get there.
All the intention.
All the intention's there. The effort's going there. And if it doesn't happen, oh well. It's leading me where I need to go, and having this faith that I'm getting guided exactly where I need to go. And so practicing this art of detachment, if you will, or not tying so specific to outcomes and timelines and so forth, the level of freedom and peace that I am feeling and where I'm at today is priceless. It's hard to put into words. And so this whole thing, I love this because misery is, we don't feel like it is, but it's a choice.
Oh, it's absolutely a choice. Misery is a choice, period. End of story. Like we get to choose. Pain is inevitable. It's gonna happen. We have to experience it. And it's also the fastest way to growth. But even though
you can't grow without it, my opinion.
And we got to dig into this one because I've had that discussion for over 20 years with various different philosophically minded people. And, but yeah, the misery is what we add to the pain. And misery is what we heap on top of each other. And when I was going through my divorce, I felt the natural pain. There had to be pain in there. There was loss. There was so much love in how I loved my kids and all of that. And then there was this big bucket over here with this ladle. And I'm just like, oh, well, I'm going to blame. Now I'm going to shame. And I was covering myself in this sludge of misery. And it wasn't until I pulled that away. And it was actually funny because I went to lunch with my friend Jesse Citrid. When we were kids. I'm a little bit older than him, and I used to babysit him. And now he's my financial advisor and a good friend. And we went to lunch, and this was like in the heat of the divorce. And I was like, let me just go through my litany of grievances for you. This bad thing, and this happened to me, and this happened to me, and this happened to me. And he was just like, time out, Curtis. Life doesn't happen to you. It happens for you. He's like, all of these things, all of them are for your good. And at the time I was so into the misery, I'm like, okay, he must not have heard. I better go through the list again. Let me tell
That's
you
your
all
ego
of that.
too, because it's the story you've served it, because you've almost a way of unconsciously like justifying or validating the misery you're feeling just because of this.
Yeah.
Right. It's an ego function, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is. And that's the beauty of this revelation that he helped me with, was that he's like, Curtis, it's all for your good. Even the pain, even this entire list of what you've just described, it's for your good. And I realized that I had to change the question, because I was playing victim. And I know we're going to talk about the addictive behavior and things like that. And I was playing the victim in addictive behavior. It is always preceded by the victim mindset. And that's what I was doing. I was getting into this victim mindset of, well, this and that and this and that. And when I changed the question from why is this happening to me to why is this happening for me, I went from victim to victor. And there's actually one more rung on this platform or ladder, is that if you change the question even one more time, how can this happen through me? Then you go from victim to victor to vessel. And you get to be a vessel to help others. And, it's funny because we knew each other back 150 pounds or 30 pounds or whatever it is ago.
I was a bigger boy. Yep.
And we knew each other when you were going through the crap. Yeah. And I look at your experience, like I look at your Instagram and your posts and all of that, and there's so much that rings true. Like I see this, I see this, and I see you becoming a vessel. I see you going from that victim to victor, and now into the vessel where you're helping others become the victor and rise up.
Yeah. Thank you. I thank you for seeing me. I think one of the greatest gifts I have, honestly, is I can connect in people's pain, because I've experienced it. I feel like, everybody uses the word I know. It's overused. Like, I know I wouldn't do that, or I wouldn't do this, or I know. And the truth is, like, you don't know unless you've actually experienced something. Otherwise, it's a belief or an opinion. But knowledge comes from experience. Knowledge comes from, I remember when I was had my investment firm, I would give, before I went through my divorce, I would give advice to couples all the time. Pragmatic, just coming from a good place, And then I went through my own, and I'm like, I don't know anything. I don't know what I didn't even know what I was talking about. And so then the message, but then what I found and you probably remember this too. It's like when all the people around you want to help, they want to support you. Everybody's giving unsolicited advice. I would do this, I would do that. And I'm listening, but then all of a sudden it's like, but when someone had been through one, all of a sudden it's like, oh, And so so to be able to connect in people's pain, it's a gift.
Yeah.
But and because then you're able to be seen, because this too, when you're in your darkest moments, or you talked about having the mountain just come crashing down on you, it's like especially men, we isolate, we pull away, the shame, like it can get very, very dark.
Yeah.
And what I have found is the more that I open up about my darkness, it opens up the door for others to be able to share theirs. Like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. Oh, he knows it. Oh, a couple of years ago when it was April of 23, I finally went on social and talked about everything, went on with my firm, took accountability, talked about being suicidal, and the hundreds of messages. But what surprised me the most were dozens of men DMing me. You saved my life today. Thanks for being brave. I'm not alone. And I'm just so much pain, and just like this silver lining of like, I can, like, oh my gosh, like, and I had this aha, I'm like, this is something about talking about our weaknesses, our vulnerability. It opens the door for other people to be seen, that they're not alone. And, and this leads kind of to we're going to get into this in a minute, because we're really going to talk about the addiction side of it, because there's so much shame attached to that.
Yeah.
And yet when you can all of a sudden have nothing to hide, your secrets are out, it's just there. When I was going through all the pain of my stuff, I had a coach who was helping me, and he's like, you're not there. He goes, when you're standing naked in a stadium of 60,000 people, as a metaphor, you'll know you're there. So throughout the process, I think I'm there. He's like, nah, the shirt's still on. Now up your underwear still on. And then towards when everything just rock bottom gone, he's like, you're there, you know? And it's so painful. That's so much, but then there's freedom in not having to hide, just in so many ways, you know? And full circle authenticity. One of the big things that I want to embody is, you and I are on this podcast. This is going to be on, you know, social media, YouTube, whatever. My intention and the way I want to live my life is how I am with you right now is the same way I am with my kids, is the same way I'm on social, same way with my friends. And then if you were to walk into my bedroom at 11 o'clock at night and I'm sitting there in the dark, hey, Curtis, surprise. Like I don't want to live a life of secrets, I don't want to carry guilt. I don't want to carry shame. Well, I'm fine if I've done something, but more importantly, I want to be integrous with myself.
Yeah.
In an alignment with myself. And as I lean more into that, there's confidence that's built. There's a sense of, there's a sense of personal security that comes with it.
Confidence.
Yeah. I think it's the most attractive quality that any man or woman can have, but you can't buy it. You can't. I mean, there's plenty of people that fake it, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a very big difference between confidence.
Oh, yeah.
Confidence is quiet.
Right here.
Confidence is how you walk. Energy.
Yeah.
It's an energy. It's a state of being, and again, the pain helps activate that. The hard heart helps activate that. You know, and so this is obviously a very passionate topic for me too, right? Because I've seen it in my own life, and then also just wanting to help men do that. And I also believe, you know, pain being the activator, I think many times the answers that we're searching for, the light, if you will, is actually found in the dark. The dark is what activates the light. You know, I say this all the time, is I believe we're at 100% capacity all the time, whatever that happens to be. And if we want, let's say, more money, more passion, more intimacy, better physical condition, whatever we want more of, it requires that we let something go. There's a release. It's the letting go. It's the shedding. The shedding is many times just tied to stories, limiting beliefs and all that, but and obviously behaviors, but it's the letting go of the stuff that doesn't serve us is where the pain is.
Yeah.
And yet we don't have the capacity to bring in what we want with this we got to cut the low hanging fruit. And many times that process is so painful that it actually brings you even darker, into the dark, even deeper of the letting go, until you in many cases hit rock bottom. And there's beautiful gifts in rock bottom, whatever that is for somebody.
Yeah. And this reminds me of an experience I had. I do a thing called Summit on the Summit. So we hike mountains like Timpanogos here in Utah, or Kilimanjaro, and with Timpanogos, I had a friend, Brianna Johnson, come on our expedition. So we do these activities as we climb, and they're very meaningful, very, very introspective. And we were at the meadow, the top meadow, not the first meadow, the top meadow. And we had started in the dark. We'd started in the dark because we wanted to get to the summit by sunrise. And so we got to the meadow, and we were going slower than we had anticipated. And that's when the sun started coming up. And have you climbed Timp?
I've never done Timp, yeah.
So,
it's been a long time. But
there's the top meadow and there's the lake. And then you see that there's this massive climb up to the saddle. And then from the saddle, you still have to go to the peak. And at this point, we'd been hiking for hours and hours. And Brianna was having a little bit of a tough time. And so, when I said, all right, guys, we're almost there, we just have to get up to the saddle and then up to the peak. And I just saw her face just drop like, oh no, we still have that much farther to go. And we got to the top and we made it back down, and down was even harder for a lot of people. And she had me on her podcast afterwards, and we talked about that experience. And she said something I never thought I'd hear. She said, I was so grateful for the darkness. And I was like, wait, what do you mean? You were grateful for the darkness? She said, yeah, I had my headlamp on and all I had was 6 feet in front of me. And I couldn't see past that 6 feet. And if I had known when we started that we were doing what we were doing and where we were going, I never would have taken the first step. But because I only had 6 feet, I believed I could go 6 feet. And I was so grateful for the darkness.
I love that.
And it brought to mind this idea of faith or surrender. And in all of the authentic emotions, surrender is right at the top of the transcendent emotions. Learning to surrender is one of the most transcendent things we can do. And faith and surrender are so synonymous. Having that faith, because what surrender says, I'm going to do my best and give God the rest. I'm going to do everything I can. And if God says, no, we're going a different way, okay, we're going a different way. And the counterfeit of surrender is attachment. Resignation, is resignation. So surrender says, do your best, give God the rest. Resignation says, it's not worth trying. I'm not even going to get off the couch. Where's my Netflix? But they feel so much like each other that it's easy to think, oh, I'm in my authentic self of surrender. Surrender is so full of effort. Surrender is full of effort, intention, desire, drive. And when we're done with all that, we give away the consequence. We let the consequence happen. Whatever is going to happen after I make the effort, that's surrender. Resignation says, I don't need to make the effort. I don't need to go there. It's not worth it before we've even tried.
Yeah, I love that. We were talking about surrender. I was wondering what the counterfeit emotion was to that. So I appreciate you bringing that. That resonates. Well, I want to dive into something that you do a lot of work with in pornography recovery.
Yeah.
And again, before we started recording this, we're talking about addictions and, some of our own, experiences with it. And I'm really passionate around this because I believe, whatever the modality is, behavior, substance, whatever, it's an epidemic across the world. And, and for me, I've said this many times on this podcast, said this before we started recording, for me, there's lots of reasons why, but much of it is, for me is rooted in avoidance. Mm-hmm. Is where, not wanting to feel or address something or do something. And so we turn to numb or to comfort, which is temporary, but whatever it is, you cannot outrun it.
Yep.
It could be the truth will always come out. It will reveal itself in one form or another. And we have free will to choose if we want to lean into that pain or not, but you've been actively doing this for a long time. You work with a lot of people, mostly men, right?
Strictly men.
Mm-hmm. So share a little bit about your program, what your experience is, and what do you feel is, my example, I know it's different for everybody. I use avoidance, but what do you think leads, in this case, we're talking about pornography, leads men to that?
Yeah. Thank you for talking about this because it's so important. And for any of the listeners that are men, which I know a lot of your listeners are, I want them to know they're not alone. They're not alone in this. Like the National Library of Medicine did a survey, I think it was 7,000 people, and they found that they asked the question, have you looked at pornography in the last month? And 91.5% of men said yes. It's 9 out of 10 people. And you made a comment earlier, like the other 9%, half of those are probably lying or are so deep in shame that they aren't even going to say it. So it's probably higher. And even for women, it was 60%, which blew my mind.
That's wild.
That blew my mind because women's brains they're not stimulated visually. And so, yeah, that fact is just crazy. That's a whole nother podcast all by itself. But yeah, you're not alone in this. We're not alone in this, that we all go through this. And the critical piece of this is that most men are not addicted to pornography. They're not. They're addicted to shame. And this is so critical. Brené Brown, as well as the University of Oslo out of Sweden, they did independent studies. And if you look back at the research, if you look back at the clinical studies, shame does such a good job of mimicking guilt that almost all of them say the shame/guilt study. And we have got to get away from that mentality because guilt is healthy. Guilt is important. We need to embrace guilt and be grateful for guilt. But shame is that insidious counterfeit. And they both did a study, came up with the same results because all the other studies were shame and guilt as if they were one. They separated the two and they said, what is the result of shame? And when they found the same result was that shame is there's a direct correlation from shame into addiction, into bullying, into suicidal ideation, into all of these things. There's a direct path in from shame. But then they flipped it. And I don't know if this is the first time in history this happened where they counterposed the second half of the dyad, but they flipped it. And what they found was fascinating. That guilt was the way out. Shame is the way in.
Fascinating.
Guilt is the way out. And when we get into guilt, a mindset of, I want to repair, I want to make amends, I want to take action to better myself and the person I hurt. That's the path out. Like you were saying, the avoidance. Shame needs 3 foods to survive. It needs silence, it needs secrecy, and it needs judgment. And the secrecy is the hiding. The silence is, I'm not going to talk about this with other guys. I'm just going to keep quiet. But then there's the judgment aspect. And when we judge, we do it harshly. And I used to think in the past, I'm not a very judgmental guy. Holy crap. I really was. And you think, Curtis, he's that nice guy.
See, I think the catalyst, and I don't want to get off this, but we were talking about pain. Mm-hmm. Is being a catalyst for so many different things. When you all of a sudden go through your own dark period or your own hell, if you will, you shift from judgment to empathy because of your own experience of going through that. Like I feel like I think we all judge to a degree, one or another, but overall today I'm less judgmental than I've ever been in my entire life, ever. Like
so accepting,
just like, and I don't know what led somebody to do something. I don't know the literally going back to who they were as a kid and every decision that they made in life that led them to doing whatever they happened to do. And I could judge that, or I can just be like, meet with curiosity or compassion, or like, I don't know. Or like, geez, rather than like, well, I wouldn't do that. I'd be like, I wonder what led them to that. I wonder what else is going on. What's the other half of that story?
Yes.
There's
and so always
the
a
world
reason.
Needs so much more of compassion and curiosity, but more often than not, the reason we're judging is we're just projecting our own insecurities, beliefs, our own whatever, that was going on inside of us on somebody else. It's the guy that says, I can't believe he's looking at porn, but the guy that's saying that's got a painkiller addiction.
Yeah.
Or the raging alcoholics judging the guy that's smoking a lot of weed.
Yeah.
It's so funny to me. Like,
yep, it's so true. And my favorite definition of shame is self-loathing wrapped in the cold, wet blanket of should. And this I should do this or I should do that, or whereas it's should is such a damaging word. Like in my first book, you won't find a single instance of the word should or shouldn't. Not one. And I made sure that very intentionally in all of my blogs, you won't find the word should.
Yeah, don't ever should on yourself.
Yeah, we got to stop shoulding ourselves because it's so damaging. Instead of saying should, well, who says you should? No, say, I want to, I desire. And because you think about, I should lose 10 pounds. What actually happens when you say that?
Yeah, shame's attached to it.
It's completely shame. And do you actually do anything about it? No, you just feel crappy. You don't actually do anything when you say, I should do this. You just sit there on the couch, keep scrolling Netflix, and instead of that, just changing it to full responsibility. Because should is actually abdicating responsibility. Well, someone said I should. Well, that means I don't have to be the one that's taking responsibility for this. And so, so I know we're kind of off on a tangent.
No. Well, yeah. But again, bringing it back to the addiction, right? With who you're working with. I love that. I think the 3 things you said was, shame, was secrecy.
Secrecy, silence, and judgment. Yeah. And that hiding is so corrosive. And it's crazy because sobriety is the counterfeit of recovery. And you look at the world, and almost not all, but almost all programs out there are sobriety programs. And run a stopwatch. Every one of those programs says, okay, let's start the watch. Ready? Go. And the number runs. And congratulations, here's your 1 week coin. Here's your 2 month coin. Here's your 1 year coin. And we talked about this earlier, worth. They say, oh, today I'm worth 2 weeks. And what happens when, oh crap, I just had a relapse? The clock goes back to zero. The clock starts over. And that's the sobriety mindset, is that I'm going to measure how long. And the definition of sobriety is the time between relapses. Meaning there's a relapse here and there's a relapse here.
Yeah, it can create an all or nothing.
That's exactly.
And that's a slippery slope, because nothing in life is all or, I mean, of course you could find, but generally speaking, it's like, it's about progress, not perfection.
Yes.
You know, it's like a fitness journey. It's like, if I got to be perfect with my meals and I got to be perfect with this, and it's like all of a sudden you eat something that maybe is not part of your plan. I was almost said should have. I didn't want to say that. You know, almost it's part of your plan, and then there's shame and guilt. It's like, oh, I screwed up or whatever. I got to start over. But it's like, or it's just like, I wanted the cookie, and it's okay. You know, and I get for some people just the taste of something, they're gone. Right? It's and I would argue, we could go down rabbit holes with this. I would argue too that maybe that's also just embodied in this whole experience of what you just said, is like there's not even room for that. And not that it's healthy, but like that the one screw up. I mean, someone that's been sober for 10 years all of a sudden drinks or something happens. I can't even imagine all of a sudden just 10 years is down the, you know, or whatever it happens to be. It's tight. Yeah. This is actually phenomenal. I haven't heard it this way, but you're right. It's this all or nothing thing, and
it's very black and white, and it says how long, and there is zero correlation. There's absolutely no correlation between how long you've been sober and how much you've recovered, because sobriety says how long, recovery says how deep have I gone in my soul. And a great example of this, a friend, he shared that his dad was a raging alcoholic all growing up. And I mean raging. Like he was violent. And when his brother turned 18, his brother followed suit. He tipped back the bottle, and he was, following his dad's footsteps. And about 5 years ago, both of them said, let's figure this out. So they entered these programs, and they were at a family dinner, 5 years sober, right? And I use that word intentionally, 5 years sober. And my friend asked his dad, he said, so Dad, when was the last time you wanted to drink? And his dad thought for a minute, and he goes, I don't remember. And he asked his brother the same question, and he goes, this morning. He's like, what? He's like, oh, actually, no, I wanted it about 15 minutes ago. And every morning I wake up with the thought of, when can I get a drink? Every morning for 5 years, he has that thought. And it's so miserable. Sobriety is miserable. Like, it is the definition of misery. It's without joy, because there's this demon. I brought a demon. I got all sorts of. I love it. There's these demons in our souls, right? And sobriety teaches us, push down the demon, suppress that, push it down. Don't let it escape. Make sure that it doesn't pop up. But like a beach ball, the farther you push a beach ball underwater, the more pressure there is to shoot it back up. And sobriety says, it's black and white, it's yes or no, it's good or bad. You have to keep this demon down in your soul. Recovery says, no, I'm going to pull this demon out. We're going to go to lunch. I'm going to sit across the table from this guy, and I'm going to say, hey, what's up? What are you doing? What are you trying to do for me? Notice the word for me. What are you trying to do for me? And I'm going to see it, and I'm going to understand it, and I'm going to make peace with it, so that it's no longer trying to jump out of my soul. I've already pulled it out. And the next time that trigger happens, the very next time that trigger happens, and this little guy is out of my soul, it's like the total response is like, okay, we're good. We made peace. I don't have to go to that behavior because that little guy's not screaming inside me anymore. And that's one of the big differences between sobriety and recovery. Is sobriety says, white knuckle this thing, screech around the mountain passes here in Utah of, at 100 miles an hour. I don't care how many filters you've got on your phone or computer. If you're screeching around those corners, there's going to be a time you're going to fly right through those barriers, right off the edge, 2,000-foot drop. And that's sobriety, is try and put up as much barriers as you can. Recovery it's driving in Iowa. The road is straight. The total elevation of the state is like 200 feet, and there's corn on each side. It's a different road. It's not even the same road. And being able to pull these little guys out and say, hey, I want to see you. I want to understand you. When we do that, we realize they're not actually demons after all. They're a really important part of ourselves that have been screaming for help, that we can pull out and we can see them. We can even embrace them. And we can say, I accept you. Come back in, but in a very different place. Come back in. And there's a scripture that says, be ye therefore perfect, right? Matthew 5:48. I think that's one of the most misunderstood scriptures in all of Scripture. Number one, because we think that means infallible. It doesn't. It doesn't mean infallible, not at all. And number two, it implies that it's part of this life, and it's not. But if you go back to the Hebrew and the Greek, both, if you go back to the word perfect in Hebrew and Greek, they translate to a very different thing. It says, be therefore whole. Mm-hmm. Be therefore complete. And if you think about all of these pieces of ourselves that we hate, well, I hate the fact that I look at pornography. I hate the fact that I'm doing this, or I hate this. And you guys don't get to be a part of me, the whole me. When we fracture our souls and we push these pieces outside of ourselves, we're not complete. We're not whole. When we exile...
Yeah, it's making friends with the shadow. It's making friends with that side of us. Every one of us has, whatever it is, a serial killer voice that shows up every once in a while, or the negative self-talk, or the examples you give. We all have it.
We do.
Everybody has it. It's like I'm not making light of anything when it comes to like schizophrenia, right? But the reality is, if what we were saying in our head was spoken out loud, and we were saying it to everybody, everybody think everybody's schizophrenic. It's crazy, the stories and the things in our head, but all of a sudden it's like, but when you finally just make friends with that side of it, it's like, yeah, this is part of me. I'm aware of it. And obviously I think it's the acceptance of it. It's like, hey, this is part of me. It's not who I am. It's, and well, in some ways it's a part of who I am, but you can practicing detaching from that side of it, you know, and
seeing it in truth. That's the thing is we think these are demons. They're not, but they feel like demons because they're screaming loud inside our souls. But when we can see them, we can actually realize, you know what? You are actually trying to protect me this whole time. The definition of trauma, this is such a healing, beautiful definition. It's so simple. Trauma is simply an experience we had that our brain couldn't understand. That's it. And we think, oh, this trauma, this big monster trauma. No, it's just saying, guess what? The 10-year-old Curtis, the 10-year-old Adam, yeah, he couldn't understand what happened.
How to process it.
But guess what? The 50-year-old, they do, right?
Well, not even what I went through the last few years was traumatic trauma, PTSD. Extremely, and you're right. It's like I don't know how to process this. All the things that are attached to it, right? And it comes with time and a lot of work to move through that. But again, when you can look back and say like, okay, that's not who I am.
Yeah.
Come full circle here, kind of as we kind of wrap things up here, just like on our worth and who we are. Yeah, this is fascinating. I noticed you brought a couple books. I want to make sure that tell us about the books you brought.
Well, we can get into
Yeah,
it.
because you're a best-selling author. What do you? I want to make sure that I want our listeners to know more about you, where they can find you. I mean, you and I could spend hours on this, right?
We could.
This stuff, I geek
We
out on this
literally
stuff.
could.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, the reason I brought the book wasn't because of the book itself. It was because the experience behind it. And it's more so because of this in the book is I'd written my first book, The Entrepreneur's Paradox, and it was all about business. And I've been a businessman most of my life. An entrepreneur, started 5 different companies, blah, blah, blah. A lot of attachment that there used to be there. And when it hit the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, my publisher, they're like, hey, let's do a 3-book series. I was like, great. So I started writing the second book called The Timeline of Business. And I was going through my divorce, and one of my best friends, Jerry Williamson, was also going through his divorce. And he was about a year behind me. And he would come over. Still hurts. He would come over and we'd talk, and we'd sit in my living room. And we'd talk for hours. And every time he'd leave, he'd say, Curtis, I hate you. And I'd be like, why do you hate me, Jerry? And he said, because you make me cry. And I hate crying. It's like, I don't cry. And Jerry didn't understand the difference between guilt and shame. He didn't understand the difference between pain and misery. And he didn't understand the difference between sobriety and recovery. And Jerry took his life. And I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with how he left this earth because because I love him. I love him tremendously. And there's a hole in my heart where Jerry used to be. And that's why I called my publisher and I said, hey, I've got to write a very different book called Counterfeit Emotions. I don't even know if I'm going to come back to the business books ever. Like, this is my mission. And that's why I started these recovery groups, was because there is hope. This idea that once an addict, always an addict is such a lie. It is such a lie.
I know it's worked for a lot of people. I hate the thing, like, even people 10 years into sobriety, and this is, AA, it's like, I am an addict. I am an addict. I am an addict. And it's like, words are powerful.
They are.
It's like, again, it works for some, right? To each their own, but like, I do not identify. I cannot connect with that.
And there's a reason you don't connect with that, because it's not true. Just like those titles of like CEO and Entrepreneur of the Year, the same thing is when we attach to that, we are attaching our worth, and we're painting this big sign across our chest saying, I'm an addict. And when, just like you would identify with being an athlete, well, what does an athlete do? They wake up early, they eat healthy, they go for a run, they do all the things athletes do. When you say, I'm an addict, you do the things an addict does. And it's so damaging. And most men are not clinically addicted to pornography. They're not. And that's why there's so much hope, is once we can identify the real cause and get rid of that, the pornography just disappears. It dissolves. There's no need for the filters. There's no need for all of these Band-Aid fixes, because these little guys aren't in our soul anymore. And the way I know someone is recovered, and this is probably going to go against everything you've ever heard, and I don't care because it's truth, is when they get down on their knees and they thank God for the lapse. We don't call them relapses, we call them lapse, because only one is what's happening now. And that's what serves us, is to look at that one. And when he gets down on his knees and he says, thank you, God, I know he's in recovery, because he sees the fact that God put a pin in the map of his soul. It's a GPS coordinate, the exact location where he needs to dig the skeleton out of his soul that's been there haunting him for so many years. It's not a 20, 30-mile radius. It's not a, hey, go be good. It's, this is the place right here where you need to dig. Here's the shovel. Let's trade your shame in for a shovel and let's do the digging. Because when we do the digging, that's when we can make the change.
I love that. Wow. What a phenomenal way. Thank you for sharing. Sorry about your friend. I'd love to kind of end on this. Just I appreciate you sharing and being open about that. You said something that's really important. You're not alone. Like, looking here at the camera, like, you are not alone. Like, no matter what's going on, no matter how dark the season is, like, it's just a season. It's temporary. When I was suicidal, hours felt like days, days felt like weeks, weeks felt like months. It was excruciating, but it was temporary. And you don't need to succumb to it. You're not alone. The shame cycle that, Curtis has been talking about, like, they're just stories and you can move through it. And what's happening, you don't see it or feel it. It's a gift, and it's helping release what's not serving you. And you've got a choice to stay in it. And I'm just inviting you, no matter how challenging it is, lean on people, reach out. Don't be afraid to talk about this with people. There are people that are willing and able to help you. And there's people like Curtis and myself that have gone through this kind of thing and have experienced it. We have intimate knowledge of what that feels like. And here's our two men sitting here today saying, look, we've gone through some pretty difficult storms, and look where we are today. And even more importantly, we both can look back and find a lot of gratitude, and there are gifts in what's happening. So where you're at today is a gift. I can't articulate that enough. Curtis, thank you, my friend. It's just been such a pleasure to have here, and your passion, and for you sharing the stories, and just, there is a one thing that you shared today that doesn't resonate or I connect with. And I love the work that you're doing for all the people, especially the men. And I'm excited to see, the good that you're able to spread to, the rest of the world as you continue to grow Counterfeit Emotions. And also go check out, we'll have a link to his podcast. Just launched his podcast, and as you can tell, he's very knowledgeable, very passionate about this. And so please go support Curtis. And again, thank you for joining us today on the Burnout Podcast. We'll see you next time.